When you're a small community like this with a relatively small housing base, and you're right next to this massive economic and wealth engine called New York City, you don't need a landslide of people moving up here.
50 families from Brooklyn.
You need 50 families a month, and it has a very distorting, very powerful impact in our market.
I'm glad to welcome Hayes Clement to the HV1 Podcast, and it's a pleasure seeing you in these troubled times. You're somebody who will express an opinion, and usually because of the breadth of your experience and contacts, it's likely to be an intelligent perspective.
Well, I appreciate that.
Which we welcome, yes.
I appreciate that. It's always a pleasure to sit down with you, Getty.
Good. We had talked about what we were going to talk about, and there's kind of two directions we could take. One is Hayes is really involved in more things than practically anybody around, in that, city committees, professional real estate things, family. For all I missed was that you weren't simultaneously president of RUPCO at the same time.
I've got enough on my plate right now, but thank you.
Well, what are the things you have on your plate? For instance, I didn't know you were that involved in family.
Well, I've been on the board of family for probably 8 years, and for the past year, I've been the president of the board of directors. A couple of other things I'm very involved in right now that I'd love to talk about is a couple of affordable housing initiatives.
Yeah, the housing committee.
So I'm on the Ulster County Housing Development Corporation. We are the ones redeveloping the old jail site at Golden Hill. So that's been a very interesting and time-consuming experience.
But and likely to have a very positive outcome.
Oh yeah, well we'll talk about it. So we have a development agreement in place with an affordable housing developer named Penrose out of Philadelphia, very highly respected group that's done probably 27,000 affordable housing units in the Northeast since the 80s. So a lot to talk about there in terms of the probably 166 affordable units that are going to be built up at the old jail site in the next 2 or 3 years. And I'm also on the Affordable Housing Task Force that Patrick Ryan, our county executive, put together for Ulster County, with some interesting findings so far, with research help from Pattern for Progress, and some initiatives that we're going to be promoting to City of Kingston and all the townships in Ulster County to get them more active and creating affordable housing throughout the county, not just Kingston.
Right. Well, when affordable housing comes to fruition, there seem to be so many pieces, financial pieces in the puzzle, that they're kind of incremental. They add on, and finally you get enough to make it work, which is what RUPCO does, I guess.
RUPCO, Penrose, companies like this, it's an incredibly complicated financing process.
Yeah.
And there's bundles of the capital that come into projects like this. A big part of it is state tax credits. A big part of it is federal grants. A big part of it is state revenue or state grants. And then a part of it is private financing. So you really have to be almost at an investment banker level knowledge of financing at these companies to put it all together in a timely basis. One of the things we like about Penrose, this group that's developing the site, they were among 5 affordable housing developers who submitted proposals to an RFP from the county.
Right.
Is again this experience. They've done about $5.7 billion worth of affordable housing development over the past 20, 30 years. They've also got a really great architecture firm that's their partner in developing this. It's called WRT Architects. They're urban planners and designers in Philadelphia. Everything they've submitted so far in terms of concepts for the site is very, very creative. It's not cookie cutter. I think it's something even the neighbors are going to like very, very much. But it sort of puts us at the leading edge, I think, of what's going to be a really great affordable housing development, and sort of a breakthrough in that for the city.
Right. When you think of the county jail becoming affordable housing, at first you think that's like putting lipstick on a pig.
Well, the building's going to be taken down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be taken down. It's not it wouldn't work as housing.
Right.
But it's a cluster of probably 12 buildings.
Yeah.
About half of it will be for seniors, and the other half will be for families and single people, and it's a good mix of pricing levels. You take what's called average or area median income and decide, at what percentages of area median income will different units be offered at. And so it's going to be everything from supportive housing, which is mostly adults with mental handicaps, all the way up to what we would call workforce housing,
right,
which is probably going to be full AMI.
Now, there are a couple of other projects that are slightly different, like Elizabeth Manor, the site across in the motel across 28, and those are quite remarkable, it seems to me.
Those are situations where the county is going to make the full investment in owning those. And I think that's going to be interesting. That's all pretty much supportive housing, though. People with very hands-on needs for support.
Yeah.
Family of Woodstock is definitely partnering with the county on the Quality Inn site.
Yep.
We would be providing programming in terms of staff and other people on site to help.
Well, that seems wonderful, having a population where you can bring services to the site,
right,
rather than otherwise, particularly for people who are handicapped in various ways, is just a godsend, I would think. Yeah.
Family is also involved right now in a pilot program, hopefully with the city of Kingston, to do sort of a half dozen so-called tiny homes on a couple of sites in Midtown, one on Cedar Street, one on Franklin. And I think you'll see that come to fruition probably by summer.
Right. Well, there was something about using $1 million of federal money to help with that, and initially talking about 15 tiny houses, but it looks like a smaller number. So they kind of we're suspicious of where's the money going? Where are the houses?
Well, the houses are built. It's a Socrates builder, so that's taken care of, and they're nice units. They would be dropped on the site.
Yeah.
So, but the city and family, I think, have been very responsive with neighbors in terms of what the density really ought to be. And again, it's a pilot. Nobody looks to that as a ultimate solution to affordable housing problems in the county, but it is one small part, and I think going to be helpful.
Now, the projects we've talked about are City of Kingston projects, and inevitably the question comes up: when are we going to have other localities take their share? And I understand with Kingston, with the services, it should have a concentration, but I would like to see the other towns step up too.
Right. If you go to the county website under the Affordable Housing Task Force, I think it's called the Housing Smart Initiative. Mm-hmm. That is about making sure all townships in the county are on board with affordable housing.
Yeah.
And part of the impetus is if all the townships don't have some plan for it, the state is going to mandate it, essentially. But a lot of people don't realize home rule for communities in New York State is very limited. The state's mandating through zoning codes what can be, how restrictive towns are going to be able to be in terms of developing affordable housing. And they're going to remove
the big war right now is, of course, accessory units.
Well, but that's driven by Albany. People don't realize.
I know exactly that.
So Albany is mandating that no local zoning code can prohibit those, essentially, is what's happening.
Yeah.
So that's what's coming. And that's not just coming for Kingston. That's coming for every township.
Right.
You can't bucket.
No, I think there are attempts to limit it, sort of trim it at the edges in terms of before the legislature passes.
I think the General Assembly passed a pretty aggressive
Yeah.
thing about accessory dwelling units. As far as I remember, it maybe died in the state Senate toward the end of their session, but it's going to come back, and it might be tweaked and it might be modified, but it's going to be out there.
More likely. Yeah. But it's it's one of those things that seems to stir up passions.
Well, and it has a lot of implications for a city like Kingston, where you have a lot of architectural character, historic neighborhoods you want to preserve in some fashion, sensitively with affordable housing needs. But one of the provisions of the bill that was in the state Senate was, I think it was any house over 1,500 square feet could be subdivided effectively into a two-family without much oversight from again, local government in terms of putting a brake on it. So to take, 1,500 square foot houses in, say, a neighborhood like Levan Street, Brewster Street, high density, not a lot of off-street parking, houses pretty close together, that has major implications for changing the character of those neighborhoods with potentially too much density. So I think that's going to be one of the major challenges for folks to work through in reconciling the need for affordable housing, but also the need to preserve, historic character.
Right. Well, the new zoning code, the new zoning approach, really in Kingston, is something I'd love to talk about, but not today.
Sure. You want to talk about real estate, I think. Well,
yes, but in terms of the zoning, it's my impression that the new zoning will be different enough that it'll allow some of the kind of emphasis on neighborhood rather than on zoning numbers. Yeah.
We're moving toward what is commonly called a form-based code.
That's it. Yeah.
Where what's allowed is based on what exists already in the neighborhood and sort of the nature of it versus just dividing everything up into where commercial can be and whatnot. But I think that's a very strong move and is going to simplify the city of Kingston's zoning code considerably.
One of your other hats is that you're embroiled in historic preservation and in the two committees in the city government, which I guess you managed to unload one of the chairmanships on Mark Grunblatt.
That's exactly.
But
I was never chairman of that. No.
But okay. But you're the vice chairman.
I'm on it. I'm on the Historic Landmarks Preservation Commission.
Yeah. Now, there are two of them, two committees. Which one has the power?
Well, it depends on what neighborhood you're in.
Okay.
So if you're looking at the Rondell waterfront and the Broadway corridor, that's more in the domain of the Heritage Area Commission.
Uh-huh.
And then if you're looking at, historic designated neighborhoods, including the Stockade, Fair Street, West Chestnut Street, that's in the realm of the HLPC.
Yeah.
It's confusing. And I think the city's made great steps toward at least creating overlapping membership on both of the commissions. And we're now meeting simultaneously.
Right, yeah.
Which has been a godsend for applicants because it used to be, say you were an uptown store owner, you used to have to get a sign approved by both at different meetings, different months.
Yeah.
Now we are meeting simultaneously where we can, and it's streamlining the process for people considerably. It's been a really good move. Yeah. And it gives members of both commissions sort of insight into expertise and resources, and it's just been a lot of knowledge sharing. I think it's been a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting how many hats you have and how they fit together in the kind of, there must be a closet which contains all of them. Okay, let's talk about the other thing if we could. There's right now the Federal Reserve is going to tighten interest rates. It forecasted, let it be known that there will be, I guess, 4 or 5 quarter point jumps, maybe a half point jump to signal something, and that will change the economics of buying a house. Not so much the quarter point will make that much difference, but then the banks have to approve a mortgage,
right?
And it's kind of each little jump is a constraint of some sort. Now you're telling me that it's going to have. You think it's going to have less of an impact than some people, read me, think it might have.
Yeah, we're a fixed rate 30-year mortgage right now is still in the low 3s, 3.1, 3.2.
But it jumped to half a point in 1 week.
Yeah, but you could raise it 4 basis points to 4%, and it's still going to be what rates were, 4 years ago.
It's true.
It's not, and that for people our age, that's still historically low.
Right.
20 years ago, if you had told somebody mortgage rates would be, consistently below 6%, you would have jumped for joy. So I don't think that's going to be a constraint at all, for a number of reasons. But it's still historically very low. And if you look, I know a lot of people think this is a bubble, housing prices and stuff. I respectfully disagree. I think when you look at the profile of buyers right now, the credit worthiness of the buyers is very, very high. It's probably people who have like a credit score of 650 and above is the biggest proportion of home buying profiles we've seen in years.
Uh-huh.
So the buyers are credit worthy. There's not as much buyer activity with variable rate mortgages anymore. You don't really see that very often. So a lot of folks who have paid historically high prices in this market did so at a 3% fixed mortgage.
Yes.
So what you're going to see, so there's not the risk of a variable rate increasing. And I think what you're actually going to see, and we'll talk about inventory, which is the big issue right now in our local housing market. But what a 3% locked-in mortgage does right now in a low inventory situation, I feel like, is you're going to see a lot of people who bought sort of their first house in Kingston, who are ready to move up to a second house, and because they have a locked 3% on the first one, they're going to keep it as an investment rental property and not sell it.
Uh-huh.
So I think we've seen this in other parts of the country, and we're starting to see it here. You're going to see people moving up to a new house and not selling the old house.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, and
particularly with rents rising, we talk about housing prices rising, but rent prices are rising about 16% on 2 years. I mean, that's the real increase.
Now, might it affect finance companies? Rather than people who do packages of large numbers of houses and give mortgages on them.
I don't. But again, because of the credit worthiness of the buyers, I haven't heard anybody say that we're facing any situation like 2008 with the subprime lending.
Yeah,
you're just not seeing subprime lending right now.
Okay, so that's interesting. Well, give me a prediction. We'll start with where we are right now. In the last year, according to NISAR, the median house went up something like, for the year, it was before this last month, it was something like 19.7%, and now it's in the latest one is 23 or 24, and that's a huge increase, and apparently it's kind of what's happening in exurban areas outside big cities. Right. And it plays into this whole business of how much the economy is changing.
Right.
I noticed that in New York City, the rents for commercial space are still about 17-18% below where they were last year. And so that we have a fundamental change. People are in the hybrid world. People find it attractive to go to exhibit in places like Kingston or Hudson or wherever, and we'd like to keep that differential as the rest of the world changes, and it's been, I think, a very positive thing for the economy locally. Do you see that continuing, or do you see it intensifying? Or
I do. I think you hit the nail on the head. Right now, COVID completely distorted the market for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But people forget Kingston and Ulster County were a seller's market for 2 years prior to COVID.
That's right.
So we're in the 5th year of what is really a remarkable seller's market, meaning inventory relatively low versus demand and rising prices.
Right. I think the rate is down. The housing stock available for sale is down to about 1.8% or something like that.
I pulled some figures on that for Ulster County and specifically for Kingston. But you're right. When you're a small community like this with a relatively small housing base, and you're right next to this massive economic and wealth engine called New York City, you don't need a landslide of people moving up here.
50 families from Brooklyn.
You need 50 families a month, and it has a very distorting, very powerful impact in our market.
Yeah.
So we're always going to have that. It's kind of like the Ashokan Reservoir. You know, when they need to relieve 1% of the water there after a rainy season, it floods like multiple creeks and rivers here. The housing market is kind of like that too. When New York City lets off a little steam, or there's a trickle of people who want to leave for whatever reason, it has an enormous impact in our market. Yeah. So I would say right now, I think buyer demand, and this is probably seasonal. It's winter. We've had a pretty brutal winter.
Yeah.
A lot of snow. I think the buyer traffic has plateaued a little bit, but that's coupled with the fact that inventory's gone down dramatically. And so you're still going to see spikes in housing and spikes in value. I was just pulling the stats, and we can talk about Ulster or specifically about Kingston. But I look at this from the perspective, again, even prior to COVID, this was a pretty hot market. It wasn't. COVID put a booster rocket under it, but it was hot even before. 2019, before COVID, the median price of a house sold in Kingston that year was $190,000. This past year, 2021, that was $280,000. That's a 47% increase in 3 years. That's remarkable.
Amazing.
3 years. Average days on market, which sort of tells you how in demand stuff is. 2019, a house spent 84 days on average on market. 2020, 68. That dropped to 26 days last year.
Well, there's some wonderful stories about competition.
Yeah.
Where people are, the house goes to the person who's the highest above the asking price.
Right. I'm seeing a lot of that. And then one thing that always fascinates me, if you look at 2019, not long ago, how many houses do you think sold in Kingston above $500,000?
Oh, very few. Very few.
5.
Okay, yeah.
Last year, 29.
Yeah.
So the market has changed dramatically. When I started in this, a $500,000 house in Kingston was maybe a once in a year thing.
Yeah.
I happened to have sold the highest price house in Kingston last year, and it was $2.35 million. Yeah. So that shows you where you've come. That would have been unheard of.
Well, now, when you say ago. Kingston, there's this kind of statistical thing.
This is City of Kingston. Doesn't include Town of Ulster.
Not the zip code or anything like that. Just City of Kingston. Okay.
Ulster County as a whole, numbers are sort of similar. Median price was $255 in 2019, all the way up to $356 last year.
Right.
That's an increase of 40%. So Kingston is 7 points higher in increase
Yeah.
than Ulster County.
Well, I guess people from the city are slightly more comfortable buying something in a setting a house in a setting like they're familiar with in Brooklyn.
Well, I think there's a lot of factors in this, but
Yeah, it's true.
what you're seeing right now, and it's Kingston, Woodstock, New Paltz, Rhinebeck, is yes, there is a premium I think being paid on walkable neighborhoods, near amenities like restaurants, whether people actually do walk to them or not. That being more in town, houses with some architectural character.
Mm-hmm.
And houses that are move-in ready. So if you've got all three of those and somebody didn't look at your house and isn't facing 6 months of renovation, you're golden. And that's who's getting the real premium price right now.
So perhaps some of these people are the people who you mentioned who are own a house in Kingston and are ready to move up, so rent rather than sell.
I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that in the future. The other thing you got to look at is, again, it's all driven by inventory right now.
Right.
As of this morning, there are 19 houses total in the entire city of Kingston that are fully available, meaning they're not in contract, they don't have an accepted offer or anything.
That's amazing.
Median asking price, $339,000. There are 4 on the market right now over $500,000. Again, that number should be higher, judging from last year, and it will, I think, in the spring and summer. But we don't see I don't predict a flood of houses coming on the market, and there are only 8 houses fully available in Kingston right now below $300,000. With the Ulster County AMI is in the area median income for a household is in the 60,000s now. That's the whole county. At that AMI, bank rule of thumb is that you might, with a good credit score, be able to afford a house of about $230,000. There are 3 houses in all of Kingston right now available for less than $230,000.
Doesn't that
and only one of those is move-in ready. 2 of them need extensive renovation.
Boy, wow.
So that sort of tells you where inventory is and what is real about a true affordable housing crisis right now in the area.
Well, with the prices going up like that, what's going to stop continued gentrification? That is, people who are native to Kingston or have lived here a long time, not being able, finding higher rents, not being able to buy themselves. In other words, competing against people with much more means than they have.
It's a tough situation, and I don't know I don't think anyone has the full answer to that. I think the affordable housing initiatives, which I think are being pursued pretty aggressively by Pat Ryan and others in the county, I think that's going to help for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty scary as well as pretty amazing.
But it's not just an affordability thing. It's inventory at every level.
Yeah. From
affordable all the way up to $2 million houses. There's a shortage of that too, believe it or not. So it's not just an income related thing. It's an inventory related thing.
So that is one of the arguments I think the Kingstonian people made, that there is a need, particularly for people who have spent their lives here, who own houses, to kind of downsize a little bit,
right,
and to have some of the amenities that the project they envision would have. There's
a regardless of how people feel specifically about the Kingstonian, there is a demonstrated demand for housing aimed one-level living, covered parking for people 50 and above looking to downsize and get to something smaller.
Yeah, I live in
my prediction is if it's finally approved and everything and gets built, it will be fully leased out before a shovel hits the ground.
Quite possibly true.
And I think it would be local people, which, mostly. And so, again, you're freeing up inventory, finally. Some people who are in houses that they find too big for them now or cumbersome are, there are a lot of folks like that eager to find something like that in that mold of what's being proposed for the Kingstonian.
I live in an old farmhouse in Mount Tremper with land, and I look forward to the first snowdrop, which sort of almost peaked a few days ago.
Yeah.
But it will come out again, and then everything else that follows in a country springtime.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with my daughter, who's 31, a Brooklyn resident, a management consultant by a profession. And she said, when I'm old, meaning when she's my age, I see myself owning a small house where a unit where people take care, everybody takes care of it, where it's on one floor, et cetera, and an efficient unit. And I said to her, I've lived here 50 years. I feel it's part of nature. I've lived here and I want to die here. I'm not going to move to a small unit where the services are provided.
Yeah.
So that's the conversation that goes on, I
Yeah.
think.
But there are a lot of people, Kingston, Ulster County is an older community. The median age here is pretty high.
Yeah.
And so you're finding a whole lot of people in this situation who would love to downsize, therefore free up housing for younger families possibly, but have no place to go.
Well, they probably don't have snowdrops in front of their houses. All right. This has been fascinating, Hayes.
Always a pleasure, Getty.
I appreciate you coming by, and I think the idea we should continue this in some way, because I think some of the things you said and the arguments you've made are thought-provoking, and people should know more about it. So lacking the ability to battle with you on a one-to-one basis, this podcast works very well. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.